as one of the reasons that we're moving forward is we've got people that are writing books about we have this heritage of all these authors that including James Whitcomb Riley and Booth Tarkington and everyone else. And what we'd like to do is start a new heritage of our authors. And we've got John, is John here? John Houghton here? He's another one of our authors there. And of course, Marcia Adams, you all know, and so it's being developed. And thanks to Nancy Baxter and her Hawthorne Publishing, she has had a special relationship, obviously, she lived here, with Culver, and anything that comes to her attention, she wants to promote if it has anything to do with Culver. And Nancy has been a true friend of this organization, great friend of this organization. So she's got a new author here, and I'm sure you're all waiting to hear from Ms. Failey. And Nancy, if you would introduce her, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I think I'm a lapsed member, and that's been brought to my attention today. So I better take care of that. Mary Jane Failey was named Maije by, and she probably won't tell you this, so I will, by one of the people who had a cottage here at Lake Maxinkuckee, the Glossbrenner Cottage. Their dear friend and Kurt's cousin, Mary Glossbrenner, part of the neighborhood or the Indianapolis and Maxinkuckee gang, which got together as children, really, and stayed together all of Kurt Vonnegut's life. I want you to know, though, that Maije does not just live and do Kurt Vonnegut, though recently I think she may think that that's what her life has been because of her new book, We Never Dance Cheek to Cheek, which you'll be able to get if you want to get it at the close of her talk. Maije, I cannot think in Indianapolis of anyone who has been more contributive and philanthropic than Maije Failey through many, many years. She has had a wide variety of experiences and worked on the Indianapolis News in the Society department just a few years before I did as a reporter, and Fred Karst did a little bit later as the contributor from the South Bend Tribune. The News is our great love, and she has written of it very endearingly, along with a history of Victorian and later Indianapolis social history in her own life in the book Forgive Us Our Trespasses, which is also available from us and is a wonderful, wonderful book. Maije went on to, she was in the class of 40, which is Kurt's class. She went on to graduate from Indiana University, went on to the News, and then began to do a lot of work in Indianapolis clubs and institutions, becoming a trustee at Orchard School. She has recently, because this is a very active lady, she has been on the board of the Children's Museum for quite a while and is now emeritus there, but is active on the board of the Athenaeum, one of Kurt Vonnegut's great loves. And you see her everywhere in Indianapolis, and now we're glad to see her up here too. So Maije, take it away.
Wow. I sound really wonderful, don't I?
And she is.
First, I want to know if Anne Greenleaf is here. Is Anne Greenleaf here today?
No, her daughter's here.
Oh, her daughter's here. Ellen? All right. Here is a message from Kurt Vonnegut for your mother. A message? And it's right up here, and I'll read it later. But anyway, it's just one of the funny things that Kurt did, which that's mostly what Kurt did, funny things. So, it is a joy to be back at this wonderful place, so full of memories. In 1937, my mother rented a cottage for the summer, and my aunt and my cousin rented another cottage for the summer. My grandfather came from England for the summer at my aunt's cottage, and we all had a wonderful time. We loved the dances of the academy, and we loved boys, period. We always did that. Next came the Albright cottage, where Mary Jo invited our special little group to come and visit, and I can't remember a better summer for teenage girls. Elsie Ann Locke was another of our little group, and another favorite spot of mine was the Dunn cottage, where thanks to Wesley Dunn, I became enamored of the sea scow. And as luck and life would have it, I much later bought that sailboat from Wesley when the Indianapolis Sailing Club started. And thanks to Wesley Dunn, one of my favorite and least known stories about Kurt Vonnegut emerged from the Dunn cottage. The Sea Scow, 2 college freshman girls just out of school in Wellesley, Mass., a boy from Cornell, and a Harvard man. A moonlight night, sweet music wafting softly from a radio, all the glamour of Lake Maxinkuckee and youth, and what do you have? You have Kurt Vonnegut Jr., who grew up summers here. You have Wesley Dunn, who also grew up here. And you have a school friend from Grosse Pointe visiting me and Indy. And what that weekend produced was a sweet little romance that people love to hear about. And it's all in my book, We Never Danced Cheek to Cheek. And why that title? Because Kurt Vonnegut was 6'3" and I was barely 5. I had a subtitle that described Kurt Vonnegut, and I'll tell you what they were. They were in another book that I wrote. The Prince of Tragedy, the court jester of mirth, and the purveyor of And So It Goes. It all describes the life of Kurt for the rest of his life. His piece was Lake Maxinkuckee. This is where Kurt really, really related. Everything came back to this lake. His mirth was his happy and zany ideas here with his family and all the relatives in the other 5 Vonnegut cottages. Their funny names for each other, the made-up Indian names for calling each other, and Kurt being the youngest of 3, Alice, Bernard, and Kurt. And when he won the Pulitzer Prize for writing, he could not have been prouder than he was right on this lake when he swam all the way across in his birthday suit, with Alice and Bernard rowing beside him in a rickety old rowboat, both to protect him and to cheer him on. So it is no wonder that Kurt Vonnegut loved this place that you all love so much. He described it in detail in Architectural Digest some years ago. There were 5 Vonnegut cottages in all, and each relative had his or hers. The tragedy that the Vonneguts never fully recovered from was the Depression. Kurt Sr. suddenly lost his luster as an architect. No business for this talented and successful man. Kurt was taken out of Orchard School to go to Public School 43, the James Whitcomb Riley School. Life changed. Kurt's mother, Edith Lieber Vonnegut, had a very hard time adapting to unpaid bills, thinking she had lost their social standing. This actually was not the case. Nobody lost that. They just lost their money. Jane and Kurt did spend their honeymoon up here, but in the Vonnegut cottage, which no longer belonged to the Vonnegut, and whoever owned that cottage, and you all may know that, told Kurt and Jane they could have the cottage for a week for their honeymoon. But that was all, and then it was all over for Lake Maxinkuckee, except forever in Kurt's mind. And so when And So It Goes came in handy, I think tragedy, humor, and attitude toward all these gave him his immense ability to write the way he did. To love to be with people, to urge you have to be kind to each other. To come up with his crazy imaginary people, to use places like Culver in his books, to use friends' names like Mrs. Greenleaf or Dr. Hitz or Skip Failey's museum, which is a little box of junk, a roller skate key and an old rubber band and an old army thing, and that was he picked up any one of you, Gene, you could be in his book. He would pick, he just picked names. Ben Hitz was his best man. Ben Hitz was his best man. And Ben Hitz became Dr. Hitz in the suicide parlor of one of his books that you probably know about. But this is the way he was. So, but to me, so it goes is period. Get over it. It's the cork in a bottle of grief, disappointment, or tragedy. It's just Kurt's way of saying that's life, folks. That's his favorite saying was, and so it goes. And you've probably heard that everybody uses that in one place or another. Well, thanks to my book, I have friends who've been buying the book and sending it to some of our old school friends. And in doing that, I am getting letters back that are a lot better than what I just wrote. And one of them, and then I've had calls from people who got the notice this past week. And I have one that you'll love from Carol Baxter, Somerville. See? So she said, she called me on the telephone and she said, Maije, I'm in my car on my cell phone, but I have got something funny to tell you. I just got my notice from the Antiquarian Society about this meeting. But I've got to tell you something really funny. So I have it. Kurt wrote to her. She wrote to Kurt. She lives in Washington. She's been there for years, and she's one of my daughter's best friends. She wrote to Kurt, but Kurt couldn't read her writing. He could not find her at all through her writing. So he cut her address out and pasted it on a letter and wrote her back. And here is what he wrote. Dearest somebody Baxter Somerville, your penmanship leaves something to be desired. So I cannot be sure of your given name, but there is nothing ambiguous about the personality your letter reveals. It is so unambiguously a generous and warm and wise and thoughtful one. I thank you for the archival material from a Culver which was supposed to go on forever, but is no more. There should be a wailing wall at the Academy for the likes of us. The documents you sent, while of deep interest to me, would be gibberish to my children, all raised in Barnstable, Mass. I do have a widowed cousin about my age who lives year-round, no less on Maxinkuckee, in what used to be the Glossbrenner cottage, now near the South End. Katie Glossbrenner Rasmussen and treasure such things. Now, you all probably know Katie. And she died maybe 2 years ago up here in the cottage. But I understand, you can tell me, she gave you a lot of wonderful memorabilia and history, did she not, after she died? Well, I mean the kids, or somebody after she died.
Still tracing.
Are they? Because Katie, she was really the archivist of that family, of everybody, and she loved all these stories. She kept in touch with Kurt more than anybody else did. So this is what happened with Carol. And then I had a letter from somebody in our class. Somebody had bought books and sent them on to some of our classmates, and then they're writing me and they're telling me stories about Kurt. And I don't have to tell you anything more because I don't want to ramble on too much, but there are some funny things, just little snippets of typical Kurt. Of course, this is from Phil Houston. Did anybody know Phil Houston? His real name was Phillips. Well, there you are, Walter. Okay, all right. In high school, and college years, this is from Phil Houston. In high school and college years, I had no idea he'd become a literary star of the first magnitude. Nor did I sense this easygoing guy would have the determination and self-confidence to slough through the early years of rejections. But I did recognize his great originality even in high school. Now people ask me, was Kurt really funny? Well, yes, he was pretty funny. One of the things in high school, he was very funny in high school. He and another friend got caught doing something in the cafeteria, and they were punished by having to go 20 minutes in the cafeteria to eat, 20 minutes in study hall, and the teacher came in every day to check on them. So Kurt Vonnegut decided he would be Phil Houston, and Phil would be Kurt. When the teacher came in to check on them, one would answer for the other, and the other would be the other, which they weren't at all. You can follow that. Anyway, he was full of shenanigans. He signed his yearbook for one of his friends, Kurt, K-O-O-R-T, Vonnegut, G-O-O-T. And nobody ever noticed it. Nobody knew the difference. So, and this person, this classmate, Phil, said, I think the Vonnegut dog had the best dog name I ever heard, G. Rover Cleveland. That's just the, and then because Phil Houston was really Phillips Houston, he says, referring to the S on my first name, he introduced me as having been twins at birth. He had a twin brother named Willops. So that's the kind of stuff that Kurt did, and he was funny, and he was off the cuff funny. There's only one thing that I really had a hard time when Kurt divorced Jane, his first wife, who was also one of my very dearest friends. And for a while, I left him alone. And we all did. There wasn't anything to say except, why would you leave Jane, who not only brought up your 3 kids, but Alice and Jim Adams' kids had become orphans overnight, and they went to live with Kurt and Jane. So Jane had her hands full. And then Kurt left them all and went to New York, and that's when he really started. So there's one thing in the letter from Phil Houston that I do want to read because it made me feel better. It took away that little scar about Jane and Kurt. So here's an excerpt from a letter that touched me because of the great respect he shows for Jane. Here it is. My first wife, dear Jane, is in the process of dying pretty quick now, after a 5-year bout with cancer. She is surely consoled by the deep religious faith, her 6 adoring children, a devoted second husband, and possibly, but not certainly, by the knowledge that her first husband still loves her too. So that did it, then I forgave him. Everybody had to forgive Kurt. So, that, and I have some pictures up here that you may want to look at that I have had on display for book signing. And if you want to know anything about Kurt, just ask me. So that's all.
Can you take questions?
Yeah, sure.
Any questions?
And here's the book. Here's the book. Nancy. And Art.
Well, if there are no questions, we're going to set up so that Maije can sign the book if you're interested in a copy, and so we'll set it up right now.
Well, the hardcover is $25. The softbound is $18. So that's the part of it. And a part of this will be donated by Hawthorne Publishing to the Antiquarian Society.
Thank you. Okay, this is supposed to be a party now. There's a big cake back there, and so, but I'm sorry. Hold on, just a minute. You want to,
No, you stay up here. Stay up here. Stay up here. Nancy? On behalf of the Antiquarian Society, I'd like to thank you for coming, and introducing. And we just have a small token here. This is one for Nancy.
Well, nice and unexpected.
With a little note from all of us thanking you for coming. And for Maije. And a little note. And thank you for doing this book. And I'll have to say, I read this book, and once you start it, you can't put it down. I read it cover to cover. It was wonderful. I was keeping my husband awake. I had to go downstairs to read and everything because I couldn't put it down. And it's great. She keeps you just wanting to know what the next funny thing's going to happen. It's got wonderful pictures in it, too.
I'm paying her.
And the other thing I would like to mention, which I was telling Maije, the Rasmussens are having a family reunion this weekend. There are 70 of them here. Some are right next door, and I have some that are renting a cottage from me down the way. And yesterday I stopped to see Katie's sister, who had hoped to come this morning, the youngest sister. She said, oh, I haven't seen Maije, so I told Maije we'd be sure to get her together. But her daughter, Cindy, took me down to the Rasmussens' cottage, to the wood bank, to show me some of the things that are in that house. And that's what I was saying to Jeff, remind me to tell you something, because this would be the weekend for you two, which I would be glad to take you down there to meet them, to get pictures. And Cindy was showing me these beautiful dresses that she put on with the hat and everything they were taking pictures of. It has games, furniture, beautiful pictures in this house that is so neat, and pictures of all four of the girls, and two of them married Vonneguts, two of the sisters. So it was really, really fun, and I know that they would really like to see you this weekend while you're here. So anyway, buy the book.
okay, Marty time.
Nancy, tell the folks about you.